I wanted to write a chancel opera many years ago in 1984. I had the idea to do that, and I was close friends with Ida Bell Gay, who was then organist music director at the Cathedral Church of the Advent. She knew that I had that desire, and the Old Testament lesson one Sunday morning was from 2 Kings chapter 5, the story of Naaman. And she said, "Oh, Lee, I think that might adapt itself well to libretto." So I took out my Bible, read it, and agreed. And I drew up a sort of a rough copy of it at that time.
I'm very familiar with the story of Naaman. My dad was a preacher, a really terrific preacher. He was a wonderful orator, and he had a wonderful mind, and he had a memory like a steel trap. He could quote the entire Bible and tell you which book, chapter, and verse he was quoting at the moment. And he used to preach this story of Naaman, and it was very dramatic. And Naaman, of course, was a captain in the army of Assyria, and he had leprosy. So he has a servant in his house who is a Hebrew woman, and she suggests to him that he should maybe check with this powerful man of God in Israel, her home country. And Naaman takes this under advisement, and eventually he decides to try it, and he goes to his king and asks permission to go to Israel and see this prophet. So the king, who favors Naaman very highly, gives permission, and he says, "I will write a letter of introduction to the king of Israel." So Naaman takes the letter, he goes to the king of Israel, who, when he gets this letter, tears his clothes and starts to mourn and says, "How am I supposed to heal a man of leprosy? I mean, who am I, God?" So his advisors tell him to advise Naaman to go and see Elisha the prophet, who's a powerful man of God. So he goes there, and Elisha doesn't even come out to greet him. Here's Naaman, who's a really important man in his own country, and Elisha stays in the house and sends his servant out and tells Naaman to go and dip 7 times in the Jordan River and he'll be cleansed. Naaman is infuriated by this because he's a great warrior and a man of importance. First of all, this great man of God didn't even come out to say hello to him or offer him any sort of respect like that. And then he tells him to go to this muddy river Jordan and dip 7 times. Why couldn't he go to one of the beautiful rivers in his own country and do this? And he walks away in a rage. And one of his servants says to him, if he had asked you to do some great thing, wouldn't you have done it? And eventually he calms down and he goes back. And my dad's sermon, he says, "Come on, Naaman, nobody's put you in a hammerlock to make you go to the Jordan River." So anyway, he goes back and he goes to the Jordan River and he dips once and he still has leprosy, and twice and 3 times leprosy. 4 times, 5 times leprosy. 6 times still has leprosy. 7 times he comes out of the river clean. No more leprosy. Because it wasn't the water that healed him, it was the faith and obedience to God that healed him. And so he goes back, to Elisha and offers him gifts of clothing and money and all these different things. And he also asks if he can take dirt from Israel home with him so that he can always pray kneeling on dirt from this land, because he believes that this God is the true God. And he asks permission and forgiveness that he would have to accompany his king to pray before the idol that his king worships. And he said, "Please forgive me for that, but I know that God is the true God." Well, of course, Elisha wants none of his goods or anything. And he says, I work for God. I don't work for you, so I don't need your money.
How did you decide on the pronunciation for Naaman?
In the United States, Naaman is a fairly well-known name. There's in Alabama, in Birmingham, and several other cities, there's a Naaman clinic. Consulting 2 people who know Hebrew well, I did find that it was probably Naaman. But that's kind of odd for Alabamians, so we're just going to say Naaman.
This story of obedience and faith and redemption is one that's really important in many ways, but I have such fond memories of it through my dad's sermons. So, yeah.